They asked the poor girl to play a broken piano just to humiliate her. But with the very first note, the laughter stopped, and everyone realized something extraordinary was about to unfold. They thought it would be funny. In a crowded high school auditorium, buzzing with teenage voices and plastic confidence, someone pointed to the old, dust-covered piano in the corner, the one nobody touched anymore. "Let Emily play," one of the popular girls sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. A few chuckled, others looked away awkwardly. Emily stood there, clutching her worn backpack like it was a shield. Her thrift store shoes made no sound on the stage floor. She knew what they were doing. This wasn't an invitation. It was a setup. The piano was missing half its keys, and the bench wobbled like a broken promise. She could have walked away. She should have, but something inside her, maybe the same quiet defiance that had kept her afloat all these years, told her to sit down. Fingers trembling, she lifted the fallboard and stared at the faded keys. The air felt heavier, like the room was holding its breath, and then she pressed the first note. It rang out clear, haunting, and not broken at all. The room fell into stunned silence. The mockery froze on their faces. That one note unraveled something they didn't expect: awe. What followed was not just music, but a revelation. Something was buried inside that girl. And in the weeks that came, they would all discover exactly what I learned early on: that some people are born to be looked at and others are born to be ignored. In my case, I was the kind they pretended not to see. Our trailer sat at the far edge of town, where the roads stopped being smooth and the yards turned into patchy fields of dust. My mom used to joke that we lived one porch swing past forgotten. She said it with a laugh, but I could tell it stung. My world was made of peeling linoleum, handmade downs from the thrift store, and nights filled with my mother's coughing echoing down the hall. She worked nights at the diner, and when her shifts ran long, I'd sit alone at the kitchen table, doing homework under the dim flicker of a dollar store lamp. The silence used to scare me. Then I learned to fill it with music. There was an old, upright piano in the corner of the living room, more like a monument to something we once dreamed about. It had belonged to my grandmother, who used to play gospel songs on Sundays. Most of the keys were yellowed, and a few stuck like stubborn thoughts. But I didn't care. I taught myself to play by ear, mimicking the sounds I heard on TV, in commercials, anywhere. Sometimes I'd just close my eyes and play what I felt. I didn't know the names of the chords, I just knew which ones made my chest ache in the right way. No one at school knew about the piano. They barely knew about me. I was the quiet girl with the thrifted jeans and lunch from home that smelled too weird to them. I stopped trying to make friends after middle school, after I realized that most conversations were just waiting games for someone to say something cruel. So I kept my head down. I listened more than I spoke. I let them forget I was even there. When Mom passed away this summer before sophomore year, everything went even quieter. She had a heart attack during a night shift, just didn't come home. After that, I went to live with Grandma Rose in another town, a small place in Georgia with only one high school and 2 stoplights. I packed what I could carry and left everything else behind, including the piano. At my new school, things weren't that different. Different faces, same rules. Pretty girls ruled the hallways. Rich boys tossed their weight around like it came with a crown. And then there was me, background noise in a world that thrived on spectacle. But what they didn't know was that I had a voice, not for speaking, for playing. And the day they asked me to sit at that broken piano, thinking it would be the punchline to some cruel joke, I knew it was time to let them hear it. And when I did, just one note, everything changed. When I first stepped into Jefferson County High, I could feel the judgment before I even found my locker. It was in the way the girls glanced at my shoes, how their eyes lingered on the second-hand coat I wore like it was contagious. People say small towns are friendlier, but what they don't tell you is that they're also smaller in the way they think. Everybody knows everybody, and if you're not from around here, they can smell it on you. Grandma Rose tried her best. She woke up early to curl my hair the first day, handed me a warm biscuit wrapped in paper towel, and said, "Just be kind, baby girl. That always wins in the end." But kindness doesn't carry much weight when your backpack still has your old school's sticker peeling off the side, and your clothes hang a little too loose because they came from someone else's closet. I walked through the halls like a ghost, watching the social hierarchies play out like a soap opera rerun. There was the usual crowd, cheerleaders with tight ponytails and sharper tongues, football players who slapped each other's backs like life was one big end zone, and the theater kids who shouted their lines like the world was their stage. Even in the cafeteria, no one looked like me, no one talked to me. I was just that new girl who lives with the old lady behind the hardware store. Lunchtime was the worst. I sat alone most days near the back, by the vending machines. The only sounds were the hum of the soda cooler and the distant shriek of a microwave in the teacher's lounge. I didn't mind the silence, I was used to it. What I couldn't get used to was being seen only when they wanted a laugh. That's when I met Madison. She wasn't exactly popular, but she wasn't invisible like me either. One day, she walked past my table and paused. "You read Steinbeck?" she asked, eyeing the battered copy of Mice and Men in my hands. I nodded. "Cool," she said. "Most people just pretend to." That was the whole conversation. But the next day, she sat across from me. No invitation needed. And just like that, the silence got a little softer. Still, I kept my music to myself. Madison didn't know I played. No one did. There wasn't even a real music program at Jefferson. Just a half-abandoned auditorium with a stage that smelled like mildew and a dusty piano nobody cared about, except me. I found it by accident one day after school. The janitor let me peek inside when I said I needed a quiet place to read. The moment I saw the piano, something in my chest tightened. It wasn't just broken, it was forgotten. Like me, I started sneaking in after last period, when the halls emptied. I'd press the keys gently, just enough to remember what it felt like. I never played a full song, just fragments. It felt like trying to speak again after years of silence. Then, one Friday, everything changed. Madison invited me to sit with her and a few other girls at lunch. I knew it was strange. I knew they didn't really want me there, but I went anyway. And that decision would lead me straight to the piano and to the moment everything unraveled. It was supposed to be a joke. The Friday before fall break, the school held its annual talent showcase pep rally, which, despite the name, was mostly just an excuse for the cheer squad to do flips and the football team to flex. Students signed up for short acts, usually something lighthearted, a comedy skit, someone playing the guitar badly, a group lip-syncing a boy band song. I hadn't planned to go, but Madison said I should, so I did. Big mistake. We sat near the back of the auditorium, and everything felt loud, too loud. I could barely hear myself think over the sound system screeching and students yelling each other's names. But then something shifted. During a lull between acts, Madison leaned over to whisper something to Kaylee, one of the more socially strategic girls in school. Kaylee laughed, glanced back at me, and stood up like she was suddenly struck by brilliance. "Hey," she called toward the stage, "we've got one more act. Emily plays piano." She pointed right at me. My heart stopped. The spotlight, real or imagined, hit me like a truck. People turned. Some clapped, some just stared, and a few whispered in that familiar, mocking way. I looked at Madison. She didn't say anything, but her smile was tight, uneasy. I couldn't tell if this was part of the plan or if she'd lost control of it. Before I could say no, someone shouted, "Let her play the haunted piano." The crowd whooped and laughed. I felt my legs move on their own, carrying me down the aisle. I knew this wasn't an invitation, it was a dare dressed as encouragement. They expected a disaster. The piano sat like a tired animal center stage. It looked worse under the harsh lights, chipped paint, a crooked leg, and a few black keys missing. I stood beside it, every muscle tense. The microphone buzzed from the speakers behind me. A few kids were already whispering, betting on how bad it'd be. I could have walked away. I should have. But instead, I sat down. My fingers hovered above the keys. I didn't have sheet music. I didn't have a plan. Just instinct and a strange, burning stillness inside me. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and pressed one note. It rang, not just rang. It sang, clear, haunting, and full of weight. The sound sliced through the laughter like a blade. Silence fell, deep and sudden. I opened my eyes. No one was laughing now, not even Kailee. So I kept playing. I played a melody I hadn't even realized I knew, something I'd made up years ago, in our old trailer. It wasn't perfect. A few keys stuck, one note cracked. But none of that mattered. The song came from someplace raw, and every person in that auditorium felt it. When I stopped, no one clapped right away. They just stared, and in that moment, I knew I wasn't invisible anymore, and that terrified me more than being forgotten ever did. When the last note faded, the silence in the auditorium was heavy. It wasn't awkward, it was reverent, like everyone was holding their breath, unsure of what had just happened. Then, someone clapped. Just one person at first, maybe a teacher near the front. Then, another. And then the whole room erupted into applause. Not polite applause, real, stunned, shaken applause. I stood up slowly, my knees trembling. I didn't know where to look. The same people who'd laughed when I was called up were now staring at me like they'd never seen me before. Some looked impressed. Others just looked confused, like they couldn't quite reconcile the girl in hand-me-down jeans with what they'd just heard. I made my way off stage as fast as I could. Madison caught my eye as I passed. Her smile had vanished, replaced by something else, something harder to read. Regret, maybe, or jealousy. I wasn't sure yet. In the hallway outside the auditorium, I finally let out a breath. My hands were still shaking. I leaned against the cool brick wall and tried to piece together what had just happened. The thing was, I didn't even remember every note I'd played. It had poured out of me raw and unfiltered, like I'd been holding that sound in 4 years and had finally let it escape. I stayed out there until the bell rang. Kids streamed past me, chattering, buzzing. A few slowed down when they saw me. Some even smiled or nodded. It was the first time I felt like part of the scene instead of watching it through glass. But not everyone was smiling. In 6th period, Kaylee sat 2 rows behind me and spent the entire class whispering with her friends, occasionally glancing my way. Madison didn't say a word. At the end of the day, someone I didn't even know stopped me at my locker and asked, "Where'd you learn to play like that?" I shrugged and said, "Just at home." He nodded slowly, like that answer meant something bigger than it sounded. When I got home, Grandma Rose was waiting with a tray of lemon cookies and 2 mugs of tea. She already knew something had happened. I could tell by the way she looked at me, like she was proud and worried all at once. I told her what I did. She didn't say much, just listened, then reached over and held my hand. "They saw you today, baby," she said. "That's a powerful thing." I nodded, but inside, something was unsettled, because I knew what came after being seen. Expectations, scrutiny, and sometimes resentment. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a link to a video. The title, "Broken Piano Girl Shocks the Whole School." It had already been shared hundreds of times, and that was the moment I realized this wasn't just about a school performance anymore. Something much bigger had begun, and I couldn't control where it was going. By Monday, I wasn't just the girl who played the piano. I was that girl from the video. The clip had made its way from Snapchat to TikTok, and by the time I walked into school, it had over 80,000 views. People I didn't even know were stopping me in the halls, asking what song I played, if I had any other performances online, or the most common question, "Where did you learn to do that?" I didn't know how to answer. In my living room, when my mom was working nights and I couldn't sleep, didn't exactly sound glamorous. Teachers started treating me differently too. Mrs. Coulter, my English teacher, who usually barely acknowledged my presence, asked if I'd be interested in joining the literary arts showcase in the spring. Mr. Diaz from the front office mentioned a community fundraiser coming up and said they'd love a musical performance to start things off. I smiled and nodded, pretending like all this attention didn't make my skin itch. But not everyone was clapping. Madison barely spoke to me after the rally. When she did, it was short, mechanical, like she was trying to figure out whether she still had the upper hand in whatever silent game she'd started. And Kaylee, well, she didn't even bother hiding her contempt. One afternoon, I overheard her in the bathroom saying, "It's just one stupid song. She's not that special. Anyone can play if they're dramatic enough." Still, not all the attention was bad. A boy named Jordan, a quiet guy from my history class who usually sat near the back and doodled in his notebook, came up to me at lunch. "That thing you played," he said. "It reminded me of something my dad used to play on vinyl, real bluesy. You ever record your stuff?" I told him no, but that I wanted to. He offered to bring his portable recorder. "Just for you," he said, "in case you want to remember it exactly the way it was." I didn't know what to make of his kindness, but it warmed something in me that had felt cold since the funeral. People were starting to see me, really see me, but it came with this uncomfortable truth. Being visible meant being vulnerable. One afternoon, I returned to the auditorium alone. I wanted to play again, not for them, not for a camera, just for me. But when I reached the piano, it was locked. A chain wrapped around the legs, padlocked tight. A note sat on top, out of order, do not use. I stood there, staring. My heart sank. Someone didn't want me to play anymore. And worse, someone had the power to stop me. That was when I knew there was more to this piano than I thought. And someone, somewhere, was determined to keep its secrets buried. The next day, I went straight to the front office before first period. I asked about the piano, why it was suddenly chained, who ordered it. The secretary, Mrs. Beck, glanced over her glasses with a tight smile and said, "It's not safe. Maintenance flagged it." That was all she offered. I knew it was a lie. There were worse things in that school than a slightly busted piano, but something about me playing it, and the reaction that followed, had rattled someone by third period. I was so distracted I didn't even hear my name called in class. It wasn't until lunch that I thought of Mr. Lawson. He was technically the music teacher, but everyone called his class study hall with a beat. He didn't teach choir or band. The school didn't fund those programs anymore. Mostly, he just sat in the music room, surrounded by dusty shelves of sheet music and broken instruments. He was one of those teachers you forgot was even on payroll. I found him alone in room 112, tuning a violin with more patience than I'd ever seen in a person. I cleared my throat. "Mr. Lawson." He looked up slowly, blinking behind thick glasses. "Ah, Miss Carter, the new local celebrity." I shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to ask about the auditorium piano. Do you know why they locked it?" He put the violin down gently and gestured to a chair. I sat. "That piano's older than this school," he said. "Used to belong to a chapel that was torn down in the 60s. They hauled it here instead of junking it." I waited. There was more. I could feel it. "A long time ago," he continued, "I taught someone a lot like you, lived on the edge of town. No money, but a gift in her fingers. She played that same piano, and one day, she played something so beautiful at a school board event that the whole room stopped breathing." He smiled faintly, then shook his head. "The next week, they locked the piano. Said it was too damaged to be reliable. Never unlocked it again until you." "Why would they do that?" I asked. "Why shut down something beautiful?" He sighed. "Sometimes beauty makes people uncomfortable, especially when it comes from someone they've already decided isn't worth listening to." I sat back, letting the words settle. "Is that why they chained it again?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer directly. "You stirred something up, Emily. Some folks like their world neat, predictable. A girl like you, with talent that doesn't fit their story. That scares them." I looked down at my hands. They didn't feel like weapons, but maybe they were. Before I left, he handed me a worn envelope. Inside was a single sheet of music, handwritten, faded at the edges. "Her song," he said. "She never got to finish it. Maybe you will." And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just my story. It was a legacy waiting to be finished. It had been nearly 5 years since I'd last seen him. In my memories, he was always leaving, backing out of the driveway in that beat-up Ford truck, shouting promises through a cracked window that never stuck. So when I opened the door that Friday afternoon and found him standing on Grandma Rose's porch, I didn't believe it was real at first. "Hey, Em," he said, like we'd just spoken yesterday. "Heard you've been playing some kind of miracle music." He looked older, leaner, with more gray in his beard and deeper lines around his eyes. But the voice was the same, slow, southern, full of charm that usually led to disappointment. I didn't invite him in. Grandma came to the door right behind me. She didn't look surprised, just tired. "What are you doing here, Jake?" she asked, folding her arms like a shield. "I came to see my daughter," he said, eyes never leaving mine. "I've been trying to do better. I heard what happened, the piano, the video, all of it. Thought maybe it was time." Time. That word rang cold. He hadn't shown up for the funeral. Not for the court hearings after Mama passed. Not even when I moved in with Grandma, but now he was here just as things were starting to change for me. "I don't need anything from you," I said flatly. He nodded like he understood, but his hands fidgeted, betraying the nerves he tried to hide. "Look, I know I messed up, but people are talking, Em. That song you played, it's something special. Maybe we could, I dunno, work together. Get your name out there." There it was, the real reason. He wasn't here for me. He was here for the spotlight that had accidentally landed on me, a chance to ride the wave I'd created with nothing but old keys and grief. I wanted to slam the door. I wanted to scream. But instead, I asked, "You remember the last thing you told me before you left?" He blinked, caught off guard. "I said I'd come back for you." I nodded. "No, you said music was a waste of time, that it wouldn't put food on the table." He looked down, guilty. I closed the door. Later that night, I found the envelope Mr. Lawson had given me and sat with it at the piano in Grandma's living room. I started playing the unfinished melody, hesitant at first, then fuller, stronger, and as I did, my father's voice faded, his judgment, his absence, all of it dissolved into the music. But even as the notes filled the room, a question lingered. Was this really mine to finish? Or was I just another girl trying to rewrite someone else's unfinished story? The invitation came in a pale blue envelope, tucked neatly inside my locker. At first, I thought it was another prank, but when I opened it and read the embossed lettering, Southern Regional Arts Festival, featured youth performer, Emily Carter, my hands shook. I hadn't applied. I didn't even know the festival had a youth division. But someone had submitted that video, and now I was being asked to perform on a real stage, in front of hundreds of people, critics, musicians, news outlets. It was a door, wide open, and I was standing on the threshold. Grandma Rose was thrilled. "You have to do it," she said, setting down her tea with a clink. "You've got the gift. And people are finally listening." But Mr. Lawson had a different tone when I told him. "Be careful," he warned gently. "Opportunities like this come with eyes, and not all of them are kind." Still, I prepared. I practiced every night, perfecting the piece I'd built from that half-finished melody. I added my own flourishes, reshaped the transitions, let it become something both old and completely mine. The song didn't just sound like grief anymore, it sounded like survival, like home. Then my dad showed up again. This time, he wasn't alone. He brought a man in a blazer who introduced himself as a music consultant, said he'd worked with young talent before, said I had potential that could really go somewhere if I had the right guidance. I listened politely, then asked them both to leave. Later, Dad cornered me in the driveway. "Don't make the same mistake your mama did," he said. She kept her voice small, and look where that got her. I stared at him, trying to connect the man I remembered with the one throwing her memory around like bait. "She didn't keep her voice small," I said. "You just never listened." The next night, Madison messaged me for the first time in weeks, said she wanted to talk, to apologize. We met at the park, and for once, she didn't have her armor up. I was jealous, she admitted. "You walked into that school and did something real, and I couldn't stand it." I believed her, but part of me wondered why she was saying it now. On the morning of the festival, I stood in front of the auditorium mirror, staring at my reflection. My dress wasn't designer, my shoes were borrowed, but I felt grounded, steady, ready. Still, one question haunted me. Was I doing this to prove something, or to finally let go of needing to? Because I knew this wasn't just about a performance anymore. It was about whether I would let the world define me, or step on stage and define myself. The stage lights were hot, the kind that make your skin tingle before you even do anything. I could feel the weight of every eye in the auditorium, not just watching, but waiting. There were no whispers this time. No giggles, no glances, just silence. I stepped out, the piano center stage, gleaming beneath the spotlight like a secret finally allowed to shine. I took a deep breath. This wasn't the old school auditorium. It wasn't dusty, or broken, or forgotten. This stage was polished and pristine. But somehow, as I sat down and placed my fingers on the keys, I felt that same flicker of loneliness I'd felt the first time I ever played. And then, I started. The opening notes were quiet, almost hesitant. The melody, from that old sheet Mr. Lawson had given me, stitched together with my own notes, my own story. Each chord told something. The nights alone in the trailer, the silence after Mom's passing, the moment I pressed that first key in front of my classmates and made the room go still. As the song unfolded, I stopped thinking. It was like the music carried me. My fingers moved from memory and instinct, not technique. The sound swelled, and with it, something inside me unclenched. Not just grief, but anger, too, fear, doubt, all of it poured out through the keys. When I finished, the final note hung in the air for a beat that felt eternal. Then came the applause. It started slow, like people were afraid to break the spell. Then it grew and grew. A standing ovation. People cheering. Some were even crying, but none of that mattered as much as what I felt inside. Calm, full, no longer invisible. Backstage, a woman in a headset told me a talent scout wanted to meet me. A local reporter asked for an interview. I smiled, nodded, said I'd be right there. But first, I walked outside, down the back steps, into the cool night air. I called Grandma. "Did you hear it?" I asked. "I did, baby," she said. Her voice cracked a little. "You gave M more than music. You gave M a piece of your soul." And that was when I knew I didn't need a label or a contract or my name in lights. I had already won. Later, I found a quiet moment alone with Mr. Lawson. I gave him the original sheet back, now full of my notes and changes. I finished it, I told him. He looked down at the paper, nodded slowly, and smiled. "No, Emily, you didn't just finish it. You made it something new." That night, I walked off the stage and into the rest of my life, not to prove anything, not to chase fame, but because I finally understood that my voice, my real voice, was never broken, just waiting to be heard.
If you've made it this far, it means this story touched you in some way. So don't leave without subscribing. It really helps the channel and keeps me motivated to share more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And which part of this story moved you the most?